As we talked in the last video, for most applications that we develop using Springframework, Tomcat is a rather heavyweight server. So it is a wise thing to replace Tomcat with Jetty. In this video, we will talk about how to replace Tomcat with Jetty and how to make it work. So the first thing that we want to do is check what server we are running. And to do that, let's just run it. We run the application, and if you see at the end of it, here it says Tomcat started on port 8080. So this is basically, this confirms that right now we are running Tomcat and we want to replace it with Jetty. Now the first step is to modify the Palm.xml for some dependencies. So let's open Palm.xml. This is our Palm.xml, and the very first thing that we want to do, the Spring starter web automatically includes some dependencies related to Tomcat. So first thing that we want to do is exclude them. So that we can do by defining an exclusion class. So we can say exclusion, and the artifact ID should be Spring boot starter Tomcat. So this will make sure that the Tomcat gets excluded in this path. Now we have to add a bunch of dependencies that are related to Jetty. The first one that we want is Spring boot starter Jetty. So this is the one. The next one we want to do is Jetty rewrite. And third one that we want to do is Jetty deploy. And the last one that we want to do is Jetty util. Now these are the dependencies that we have changed, and now let's see if we run it what happens. Let's first refresh the Maven because sometimes it doesn't do it properly. So we just go to tutorial, Maven, reload project, and then we can go and run the project. So now if you see, the Tomcat has gone and we have Jetty functioning. So this part is done. But right now it is okay, but if we wanted to do certain customizations in Jetty, then we need to write a customizer that would help us in the customization of Jetty. So let's do that as well to make sure that if we wanted to do some customization in Jetty, we are able to do that. So to do that, we create a customizer class. And normally I put it, you can either put it in the configuration. I think configuration is a good package for it because it's type of a configuration. So let's create a package called configurations. And within configuration package, let's define a class which is called tutorial Jetty customizer. Let's annotate it with configuration annotation. Oh, this is the wrong one. This is the right one. Now once we do that, we basically have to implement a method in this, actually define a bean in this, which is a container customizer. So we label it as a bean, and then within the bean we define a web server factory customizer. This should be of the type Jetty servlet web server factory, and we can call the method anything, but I normally call it container customizer. And within the container customizer, I need to have a bunch of parameters, but they would be all labeled with @value, because these are the values that could potentially be defined from application.properties file. So first we define a server.port. The default value for is 8080, but we can override it using the application.properties file. There is a curly brace missing here. Yeah. Dollar curly brace server port dot 8080. So this is the first one. Let's make few copies of this line. We don't need to include container customizer. It should be like this. Now the second one that we need is Jetty accept queue size. And the default value is 5000. This is a string. It accepts this to be a string. The third one is max threads. Actually we can make it an integer. This should contain integer value. So int, let's make it integer. The third one is Jetty dot thread pool dot max threads, and let's say that value is defined as 2000. The next one is, let's make a copy of the previous one. The next one is jetty.threadpool.minthreads, and the min thread is 8. These are values that I am defining. You could choose the values to your liking. These are the values that I found which are closer to whatever are the default value in the system, and I am just using those. But the whole point here is we want these to be overridable if you want. The timeout at 60,000. then we also want to define, if we wanted to override where the Jetty should log. And this is very important because by default Jetty does not log the activity log, and sometimes we need it for things like even if we are using some logging framework for that. So, and the default path we can give it to /temp, but of course we expect it to be overridden to something more relevant or useful. So now with that we have defined all this argument within this method. I think we got the wrong import here. Let's try to get the right import. Yeah, the second one is the right import. Yeah, now I think it would work. Okay, so the compiles. Now what we need to do is, okay, just this dummy method is not sufficient. What we really want to do is we want to return a container, and we define a kind of a lambda to do this. So basically we call container.add container customizer, and within this we have Jetty server customizer. Now the first thing that we want to do in this customizer is enable logging. So how do we do that? To do that, we first define a file, log file equal to basically new file logging path plus so let's first define a file name. File name equal to string.format %s slash let's call our product as tutorial dash then we want to print actually the timestamp, so let's call that also %s dot access dot log, and the product name is tutorial, so that will replace the first %s. The second thing is the first is the path which we have got from logging path, so that we define here. Logging first is logging path, second is the product name, third is the timestamp. So this is our path. Now how do we get timestamp? So let's define a time format. So let's say simple time format So date time formatter equal to date time formatter dot of pattern, and basically what we want is YYMMDD. So basically we can say YYYY dash MM dash DD dash, let's say we also want hour to be part of it, and then we can say string timestamp equal to local date dot now dot format, and we pass the date time formatter to it. So this will give us like a timestamp in a string format that we wanted. So now we have this set, we do the rest of the things. So we we create a file object using that path, and that is called file name, and then we check if log file, if the base directory of that file, which is the path that we have given, if it exists, so if it does not exist, then we have to create the base directory. So we can say log file dot get parent file dot so we can ideally use mkdir if we were guaranteed that all the paths before it were existing, but because we are not sure, we will use mkdirs because it will make sure all the paths up to that directory are created. So now we have made sure that it exists. Then we can go ahead and we basically create a custom request log object to open that file and log it. So we create a custom request log object, request log equal to new custom request log, and we pass the file name because that consists of everything till that time. The full path name is part of it. Then we create a request handler we don't want this guy, we want a request log handler. And then we can set request log to the request log object that we defined on top. Now what we do is we look at all the handlers So if there are no handlers or the length of this array is 0, then we set our own handler. Else So we set this, and after this now we worry about if there is any tweaking that is done by the connection pool. So let's figure out final queued thread pool. So this is the thread pool that is part of the server. And thread pool itself has set of properties. The first is max threads, which we can set to the value that we got. Similarly, we set min threads. Then there is idle timeout. Then we have we also set the once the server is up and running, if you don't set the name of the thread pool, by default the name is assigned to be something that Java creates, and if you are doing certain debugging etc., it becomes very difficult to debug it later. So what we are going to do is we are going to assign it a specific name so that we can pull out threads related to Jetty separately. So we give this name Jetty thread pool, and that way we can isolate them and we can figure out which are those threads. And now we also look at connectors. And for each of the connectors there are certain properties which we can set. So here we have basically defined all the configuration parameters that the customizer needed, and let's run it again. So we are getting some error. Oh, because we are using local date, it doesn't like the hour part of it. So we change it to local date time. And then let's see, hopefully it should work now. Yeah. So now the server is running. Now one more thing that I want to show before we close this video is that I talked about giving a name for the thread pool, why that is important. So just to show that, I'm going to stop this and I will put a breakpoint somewhere so that we can see what are the thread pools that are running. So to figure out what is the status of threads, what we do is, it's a very crude thing and there are proper tools to do it, which we will cover later in some video. Right now a simple way of doing it is, what we will do is, we will put a breakpoint in one endpoint. We basically want to stop the application at some point, so we put a breakpoint in the get users, which returns all the users, and then we run the application in the debug mode, and once it is up and running, we will go to the postman and we will just run the postman and make that call so that the application pauses. So it's already there, we do a get on it, and if you see, this is where it has paused right now. And now we can go into the debugger. It didn't pause actually. Oh, we put the wrong breakpoint in the wrong place. We have put it in get user. We are looking for get users. Oh, this is the get user, it's got folded in here. So let's put a breakpoint here. And now let's do a get again using postman. Now if you see, it has paused there, and we have just paused it to see what threads are running. So now if you see, these are all the threads that are running on this. Let me just make it a little bigger. It has lost that window. Let's continue this thing. Yeah, so now these are all the threads. If you take this pull down, if you really see, these are the Java thread pool, these are the processes that are running for Jetty, because this is the name that we have given. Now this way it is easy to identify which are the threads that are related to Jetty and which are the threads related to others. If we don't do that, then Java gives it a name and generally most of the threads will have similar looking name, and it becomes very hard to figure out which thread is doing what. So that was one of the reasons to give that name, and I think that was just about it, and we can stop this video here. Hopefully it was helpful. If you wanted to replace Tomcat with Jetty, I have defined a process that you can use. Replacing Tomcat with Jetty is very easy, but if you want some customization on Jetty, you have to add that one extra class. And if you like this video, please subscribe the channel, hit the bell icon, share it with anybody else whom you think might be interested in this, and you can look out for more videos which are related to this field. Thank you very much for watching.